Hello everybody, I am Nick the Naval Architect. Nobody likes having to fend off overly eager salespeople. Sometimes it feels like we will do anything to avoid that situation. But sometimes that means we put it off for too long and it gets us in hot water. So, when is it the right time to hire a marine consultant? When is the appropriate time to hire a marine consultant? Well, the exact time depends on how you want to use the consultant. And more appropriate question rather than when is going to be how to best integrate that consultant into your business, because that will really determine when and how you use them. So today we're going to cover the reasons that you would seek out a marine consultant. And I'm going to start by breaking these into 3 different categories of reasons to outsource to a marine consultant: expertise, manpower, and liability. But then you can't just willy-nilly split your departments. So we're also going to talk about which departments should you split, and then wrap all of that up with when do you actually want to start your process. First, before we talk about anything else, let's lay some ground rules. Now, number 1, my advice is just one approach. It is my own personal opinion, and you're going to find many people that disagree with me and have different standards about what a perfect marine consultant looks like. That's perfectly fine, and that's fine that they disagree with me. What's more important is that you listen to all of these opinions and form your own opinion so that you're best educated and best able to get the perfect service that you want. Okay, so the first reason to outsource to a marine consultant is expertise. Now, think about this. You're a ship owner, you're running a project, and you're facing this decision. Do I hire a marine consultant, or do I just hire a new employee and bring that expertise in directly? Well, to make this decision, you're going to want to balance the cost of bringing in that new skill with the frequency that you're going to use that. Now, on the one side, let's look at the cost. Now, you're going to be hiring a new employee, that's one thing, but don't forget all the overhead costs. That employee is going to need reference material, possibly software, maybe new equipment and facilities, and all the overhead time to synchronize all of that to establish your business processes. So it's a lot more than just hiring a person. Let's take an example, a towing tank. This is a facility that determines the resistance of your ship at a very accurate level. Now, you're only really going to need to use a towing tank when you're designing a new ship. Once the ship is built, you really don't have any more need for a towing tank. So on the one side here, we've got very low frequency. You're only going to use it once in the life of the entire ship. On the other side, it's a very high facilities cost. It takes experienced staff to work with them after you've built the facility. Those staff have very high overhead costs because there's a lot of calibration involved, and very infrequent use because, like I said, your ship is going to be one and done. So in this case, you really would want to outsource this to a marine consultant because the overhead costs are just too extreme. Now let's look at another more realistic example, seakeeping analysis. First off, you're going to need to buy software if you want to do this in-house. So it's expensive, but nowhere in the range of buying your own towing tank facility. It is going to take a dedicated operator, at least one, and they're going to have to be highly educated, know the science behind the software and how to operate the software. The deciding factor here is going to come down to how frequently will you be using that seakeeping software. Now, on a case of, say, a general cargo ship, really you're only going to consider seakeeping at the initial design stage. So in that sense, why bother maintaining this drain and resource and overhead when you could just outsource it every now and then to a marine consultant? Now let's flip it around a little bit. Let's say instead that you are an operator who owns and maintains a fleet of heavy lift ships. These are ships that carry cargo just as large as the ship. Now in that case, the ship's seakeeping properties change a whole lot with every single voyage. And you care a lot about all of that because that affects how much cargo you can safely carry. It's worth the investment because you're going to be checking your seakeeping every single voyage. So in that case, the deciding factor said yes, high frequency, it's worth the cost. And just remember that. If you're looking at outsourcing or insourcing, outsourcing means you don't have the trouble of dealing with it, but you're going to pay a slightly higher cost because your marine consultant has their own overhead to cover. Very often, we don't have a constant demand for labor, so we don't want to go around hiring and firing employees all day long. Number one, that builds a bad reputation, and it's a lot of time and effort. So instead, we want to just outsource to a marine consultant for those few rare times when you need a sudden surge in manpower. It's a lot easier on you since the consultant already has all their staff trained internally. So there's no learning curve time, and you can just use that staff immediately. And that's going to be great for one-off projects. Now, scenarios like that might include modifying a vessel or doing a major documentation effort for your entire fleet, something like that where it's a one-off project but a huge increase in manpower demand. The other reason to outsource your work to a marine consultant is liability. If you do any of your engineering work in-house, you are liable to ensure that that design is safe. Okay, you can't plead ignorance if you overlooked something later on. So that means that you have a target on your back if anything goes wrong with that engineering work, if anything is wrong with the design. Now, the alternative is to share some of that legal risk. You can outsource that project to your marine consultant, and then you just have to make sure that you follow the engineer's directions clearly. All of the actual engineering itself, the design itself, the marine consultant is the one liable for that. So you can say, hey, not it was him, if anything went wrong. But that does have limitations. It's not a golden ticket. Like I said, number one, you do have to follow the marine consultant's directions. Also, you have to remember that the consultant may not have enough money to fully cover the liability. Saying a marine consultant is liable, that they have to pay the full cost to repair your ship, that's one thing. Consultants have much smaller operating budgets than a typical ship owner. So you might send the consultant bankrupt and you still won't have enough money to fix the problem. The way you get around this is if you're going to hire a marine consultant, demand that they have liability insurance, errors and omissions insurance. And then that's going to give you a much larger wealth that you can draw on if the worst that should ever happen. So consider the liability and consider sharing that with your marine consultant. Okay, so I've talked about 3 different categories of why you would want to outsource to a marine consultant. But where do you make that actual split within your internal organization? You know, where do you say, okay, this part of the project goes out to the marine consultant? First off, project management is one thing that you can outsource. This is sort of the high-level, hands-off approach, where the marine consultant is going to handle the entire project. They'll do all the documentation control, all the vendor coordination. Now that's great if you just want a hands-off, don't deal with it. Maybe you do want a bit more control. Then you can decide to outsource the engineering to the marine consultant. Now you're still handling the actual project yourself. You're deciding, when to start tasks, how much to pay for them, what the scope is. So that's all still your control. And then the marine consultant does the actual technical engineering work. The third level down is, say you also want to use your own internal engineers. Then you could outsource the drafting strictly to the marine consultant. This is going to be a case really where all you need is extra manpower, because it takes a lot of people to do a whole lot of drafting for, say, an entire ship. Now, be careful if you're going to outsource the drafting, because typically drafting up a ship or any other structure requires very close coordination between engineering and the design department. The designers will have a lot of questions for the engineers. So just be sure you have some way for frequent and honest communication. All of these have now covered the background of reasons to hire a marine consultant, of the benefits for you. Now let's go back to our original question of when. My general guidance on this one is multiply by 3. And the way I say that is, think about your project, okay? take a rough guess of how long you think that project will take to complete. Let's say, for example, a project that you think it'll take 1 month. 3 months before your deadline, call up your marine consultant and start talking to them about that. And that's for 2 important reasons. Number 1, it's going to take time to coordinate with your marine consultant. They have to send you a proposal, you have to debate the terms with them, negotiate the price, sign the contract, start up meetings. So there's quite a bit of lead time before the consultant's ready to work full steam on it. The second reason is that you may not have a perfect estimate of how long the project will take. There may be some unexpected surprises, or maybe it's just not quite a correct estimate. So it's good to give yourself a little bit of leeway. You know what? You can also talk even earlier to your marine consultant. Advice is free. Use it. Call up your consultant, ask their advice about how long they think the project will take. To summarize everything up, there are 3 major reasons that you would want to outsource to a marine consultant: expertise, manpower, and liability. And then we also talked about where within your organization to split off that work to the marine consultant. You can start at the high level of splitting off the entire project management, leaving you hands off. You can go midway of just splitting off the technical engineering work, or you can go all the way at the most intensive part where you're just splitting off the drafting work to your marine consultant. Remember, with all of these, once you've made these decisions, put it together, that's when it all comes into coming up with your best estimate of when to actually start talking to that marine consultant, when to make them aware of this project. Multiply by 3, and that's when you want to start calling your marine consultant. And it's important to start talking early, to ask their input, and to remember that yes, your marine consultant at certain times will play the part of a salesman. They certainly want your business, and that's part of being a good salesman. But that's also part of being a good partner helping you out. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. Hey, did you know that there is a magic button down below? Click the like button or even the subscribe button, and I will make more videos for you.